Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV. If you've been following me for a while, you know how concerned I am about the transition to the next generation TV standard here in the United States, where broadcasters are currently encrypting their signals to make it a lot more difficult for us consumers to watch free over-the-air TV. And we've been fighting that fight now for several months, if not over a year at this point. And in this video, we're going to look at another FCC docket that started out innocently enough, but got kind of crazy, and I think it might have some implications for the next-gen TV transition. Let's get to it. So what is this crazy docket all about? Well, it started as something relatively simple, where the FCC put out a proposed rule that would require cable and satellite providers to refund customers if they were unable to reach an agreement with a local broadcaster to carry their network. And you see this happening quite often now on cable and satellite companies, where your local affiliate might get pulled out of the lineup because the cable company doesn't want to pay the broadcaster as much as the broadcaster is demanding for carriage, or perhaps some other issues that prevent a deal from being made. Now, all the while, we, the consumers, are paying the cable and the satellite company for that broadcaster, and once they pull the broadcaster out of the lineup, the cable companies are still collecting the money and presumably profiting from it, even though they no longer have the expense of having to pay that broadcaster, whether it be for a few weeks, a month, a year, or forever. So the FCC was saying, hey, those dollars should go back to the customer if they're paying for a cable lineup that originally included the channel in question. So that's kind of the basis of this. And this docket, and many similar ones that are currently running, have come as a result of an executive order that the Biden administration put in a couple of summers ago to try to start knocking out some of these quality of life consumer issues that are out there. One recent example is the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, who went after Adobe for hiding fees and preventing customers from canceling software by putting out all those crazy early termination charges. In fact, there is another FCC docket aimed at the cable companies and their early termination fees, which we'll cover in a future video, I think. So there's a lot of this stuff going on right now. Now, as you can imagine, the cable companies are very much opposed to this rule. Verizon here kind of echoes a lot of their other industry players by saying it will harm consumers. I don't know how it harms consumers returning their money, but what they say is that if these cable companies have to pay out money every time they can't reach an agreement, it's going to be another piece of leverage that the broadcasters can bring against the cable companies. Although, presumably, if they are allowed to keep the money, they actually make more money by not carrying channels that they promised to the customer in the first place. Another interesting argument I've seen comes from the NCTA, which is the Internet and Television Association, which a number of cable companies, including Comcast and Cox and others, are members of. They say that they have no reasonable means to figure out what the cost is for even carrying these networks, even though they know what the cost is because they signed the contracts. And if I look at my cable bill, my cable company actually pulls it out. So I've got a fee every month on my Comcast bill. I don't know why I'm still paying for this. That costs me $32.75 just for the broadcast TV fee. So clearly these cable companies know what this costs. So that's their argument. Now, the best filing in this docket, in my humble opinion, is what came in from Dish, who's a direct satellite provider here in the US. Now, their filing starts off the same way all of the other cable and satellite filings began, which is saying that this is going to harm the marketplace. We don't know how much these channels cost, yada, yada, yada. But then they go there on the actual issue at hand, which is the cost of retransmission and the need to reform how it works. And Dish then provides a number of different suggestions for how the actual issue here could get resolved favorably for consumers if there were some more rules in place. So one of the things they point to, and this is something I did not know about, is that many broadcasters actually demand a cable company carry other broadcast stations or cable networks that the broadcaster might own. So for example, there are owners like Nexstar who own cable channels and will say to the cable TV provider, not only do you need to carry the local affiliate, but in order to carry that affiliate, I also need you to pay to carry this cable network that I have for more money. And this is why these deals get so complicated, because it's more than just the local channel. And so the broadcaster who has access to these public airwaves is now leveraging that monopoly, essentially, against the cable provider to say, hey, you got to carry all this other stuff I got too, or there's no deal. And we as consumers, and the government for that matter, never see these discussions. We never see these agreements. We really don't know how much this all costs because it is opaque to everyone except the two parties involved. And so that's one area that I was very intrigued about. The next thing they talk about is that if Dish and other cable providers could import out-of-market signals when they can't reach an agreement, that might help with leverage also, because even though Nexstar might own the ABC affiliate in my state, they may not own the one in the next state over. One of their competitors might, and this might allow them a little bit more of a favorable deal where they can go to the competitor and say, hey, can we bring in your network or your channel versus the one locally here that doesn't want to make a deal. So they think that might help. They also talk here about what we all want as consumers, which is a la carte pricing. And the reason why we don't get a la carte pricing with Dish or even some of the new players like YouTube TV and Hulu is because of all of this bundling that goes on. And so it's impossible to offer this to consumers because they have to carry one network and all the other associated ones that are part of the deal. And so they conclude here by saying that retransmission consent is broken. And they say, why do blackouts occur? Because programmers continue to demand even steeper price increases and other onerous terms and withhold their consent or for retransmission or carriage if they do not get those terms. While it is tempting to blame both sides for the failure to reach agreement, doing so would be wrong. The numbers, i.e. the substantial price increases programmers have demanded and received for their content over the last 15 years, do not lie. And that's what got the broadcasters all riled up. Let's take a look and see what they said. Now, the broadcasters' opening salvo is actually a very good one. They say, given that pay TV providers do not even pass along the savings they receive when they are not paying for certain programming, it is unfathomable that they would magically pass along any savings realized by improving their bargaining position. They go on to say that the best way to solve this problem is not to do anything and keep the government out of these agreements that they make privately with these cable and satellite providers. But then Dish says, but wait a second, the costs have gone through the roof. The retransmission revenue this year is projected to be 2,600% higher than it was in 2009. Now, we've seen a lot of inflation between 2009 and now, but not that much inflation. And they say it's running well beyond what the economy is running at, even with high inflation. And what they say is that the commission should not place its thumb on the scale to further advantage the side that has been dramatically increasing prices and getting away with it as a way to make consumers quote unquote whole. They go on to say that these fees have increased against the backdrop of a lot of other content choices, meaning that consumers are paying a lot more for programming that is not being viewed anywhere nearly as much it was 20 years ago. And so that is where we are at. Now, my argument, of course, is that we have another factor that hasn't been discussed here, the ability for consumers to put an antenna up and get these TV stations over those airwaves that we own for free without having to pay anybody. And of course, the broadcasters are making that much more difficult in the upcoming ATSC standard by encrypting the signal and preventing us from watching television the way we want. We're going to have to buy equipment and hardware that they approve, that they receive licensing fees for, and everything else is going to be shut out with the goal of trying to force more people into cable subscriptions where they have to pay these exorbitant fees that go up substantially year over year. And that is why we have been filing our own comments for the next-gen TV standard transition docket, and you can find more information about how you can file something at Lon.TV/FCC instructions. To date, I think we have almost 2,000 people who have submitted a response to the FCC. We've also collected over 12,000 signatures on a change.org petition, which I'll put down below in the video description. Hopefully, some folks take notice of this because I think the best way to solve this problem is to allow us to watch TV over the air the way that we've been doing it for decades now. So more to come on this, but I wanted to give you this update. This whole docket might be a way of drawing some attention to this encryption issue, which I think really is at the heart of all of this. We consumers need a little more control here. That's going to do it for this one. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Brian Parker, Budley, Hot Sauce and Video Games, Steve Green, and Amda Brown. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.